What if the reason many people feel stuck isn't because they lack intelligence, motivation, or awareness, but because part of them is still operating from an old survival pattern they never learned how to change? Today's conversation is deeply reflective, honest, and powerful. Dr. Foojan Zeine is a psychologist, author, executive coach, and pioneer in the field of online therapy. But more importantly, she is someone who has spent decades exploring what exactly helps people move from survival to fulfillment. In this episode, we'll talk about why awareness alone is not enough, how old identities and beliefs quietly shape our lives, what self-leadership really looks like, how to navigate uncertainty when you cannot see the whole path, and how fulfillment begins when who you are internally aligns with how you live externally. One of my favorite moments in this conversation is when Dr. Foojan shares the realization that we already live with uncertainty every single day, and maybe learning to trust ourselves inside uncertainty is a part of becoming who we're meant to be. If you've ever been caught between who you have been in the past and who you know you're capable of becoming in the future, I hope this episode resonates with you. Welcome to the Conquering FUD podcast. I am your host, Pennie Wilson, and today we have our guest, Dr. Foojan Zeine. We're so glad to have you. Will you please introduce yourself and let the listeners know who you are and what you do?
Of course, Penny. Thank you for the invite. It's a joy to be with you and everybody who is listening, viewing, all of that with us. I've been a psychotherapist and a coach, life coach and a business coach for almost 35 years, and started with obviously for myself to go to therapy to really look at myself and make myself better in that way. Like everything that I ever thought that I was going to have, I began creating, and then I just wasn't satisfied. So I started going to therapy. I went to coaching. I went to all of these like self-progress seminars, and I started learning a lot of these different theories and brought them together. And, when one had amazing growth and then it would stop somewhere and another theory would kind of, have its growth, but stop somewhere. And I learning from all of them and brought them together somehow to create a model that it's called awareness integration theory, created a lot of research. So we've made it into an evidence base, making sure that it's working, eliminating or reducing tremendously depression, anxiety, and raising self-esteem and self-efficacy. We opened up a large clinic where it's a virtual clinic, which we are, trained AIT psychotherapists and coaches, parenting coaches. And then we brought also the body and mind concept, like the yoga, breath work, meditation, all of the somatic work that, is part of what we need for our mental well-being and functional medicine. We brought them under one big umbrella where when people come in, whatever they need as far as mental health and mental well-being is there for them. So it's been a journey of 35 years and I'm loving it. I'm loving being able to be with people where they are and kind of going through the journey of where they like to be.
That's so beautiful. It's an honor to have you here, all of your experience, and I love that you are guided early in your experience to look for those key things that were actually working for you. I think my journey's been much of the same experience. What's really working from the inside and what can I incorporate into what I want to do for others? That's beautiful. Looking back now from where you are, did you feel like there's threads that have connected all of the way that you've been able to find your purpose in all of what you do?
Absolutely. I think that I always said, why is relationship so important for me? And why did I become like, as out of all the licenses, I chose marriage and family license to go through. And when I look at the people who come to me, it's all relational construct. And it went back to, yes, my parents got divorced and when I was 5 years old, then, there was a lot of traumas that have happened for me, sexual abuse, neglect. A lot of those have happened to me as a child. And then I was kind of like sent to US at age of 12 and I had to kind of like raise on myself. So relationships were very complex all the time, and to me, it was always like what I saw from people was very different than the behavior was very, very different than what they thought they did and what they said they would do. So all of these kind of dualities were part of this, let's say, quest to find the responsible relationship. It's like, okay, this isn't working. this isn't working at all for marriages, for parenting, for businesses, for this and that. And obviously, this type of relational construct doesn't work, but what does work? And in that journey of finding it for myself and trying to, finding it with my clients, that I think that was the threat that keep coming from me. And I also saw that as I was developing the awareness integration, I saw that we're all in the relational being. Like you need to relate to yourself internally. I'm sure everybody's who's listening to us has a dialogue internally. And then we also relate to others, right? Even objects, right? Like if you have your phone, you have a relationship with your phone. You have a relationship with your car, you have a relationship with money, right? So everything is in a relational construct. So that has been the theme of what doesn't work in relationships. Who are we in different relationships and what works in constant relationships? And obviously, I've had to go through all the things that just didn't work in order to find some level of what does work. So the answer to your question of what is the theme? Responsible relationships in all angle, because that's all that we are relational beings.
Right. I love it. And I love that that's part of the theme that keeps repeating for you, what you've noticed, and even what your hardship was, what the pain was that you came from. And sometimes I've noticed in my good, bad examples, quote unquote, from those people in my life that didn't show up the way that I expected, that they became the example for me to learn from and look for the ways that I wanted to be who I wanted to be. So that is beautiful. And I'm curious in what you said that wasn't what they said and what they thought. There was a misalignment between that and what you were noticing with your quest. What is it that is the construct of how we create and see ourselves versus how we relate to other people?
It's interesting, right? Like people come to me and I even see that to myself. It's like, well, what is your mission and how do you think you do something? And then we usually, even for ourselves, I think we usually present ourselves in our head in the way that of an ideal way. And if we're not the ideal way, then we scold ourselves for not being in the ideal way. But sometimes we're very disconnected to how we're actually behaving and the impact that we're creating. And I see this with myself. I see this constantly with my client where they say something and is like, well, you're the one who got upset, but they're not looking at what did I say that also triggered? Like, what do I do that triggers and creates things outside of myself? I'm looking at the effect outside and then I'm victimized by it as if I have no control about what's happening outside. But when I get this concept of, no, there is, I'm the co-creator with whatever relationship is happening. And the only place that I do have control is looking at, how to shift and how to be with my thought and emotions and my body sensation. And then how shows up outside of me, like with body, with facial, let's say, like nonverbal cues to the outside world or verbal cues or action, which impacts something out there, right? So if I can align this with my intention, like this, most of us are not even aware of that. We just kind of like automatically do stuff. And then we're like, well, that's not what I intended. That's not what I meant. But in my control, in my agency, the only thing I can do is to look at how I can interrelate or shift my relatedness or how I can behave. And the behavior obviously comes from, my intention, the thinking, my emotions that shows up within a relationship. And those are all parts of what, I can become like a responsible, accountable of myself and how in the world.
Right? And that's self-leadership. That's exactly the path that we're walking as we take mastery of our own thoughts and emotions. I love what you're describing about the co-creator language, the victim language. It's much similar to what a framework that I've been trained in called the empowerment dynamic, created by David Emerald. He wrote a book called The Power of Ted, and it just describes the dreaded drama triangle, as he calls it, and then the shift into the creator triangle. So that it's very similar. So I love it. It resonates and it's beautiful. What experiences did you have that helped you to do the self-work, the self-leadership as you went through that process for yourself to recognize, how am I seeing other people? How am I seeing myself? What was that process?
I think I use it every day on all levels. I've attempted to become intentional in many of the relationships. And when I see, something doesn't work. So I tune in with my body and my body says, this just didn't sit well, or, anything, whether it's food is not sitting well with me, or, the drinks are not sitting well with me, or I'm in an environment, I walk into a place and, something is off for me. So I started looking at what's going on with me and what is triggering me. And then from there, I look at the thought process, the emotional process. And
Mhm.
then from there, can I be reactive? Now that could be happen in, business, in my business reactions. It could be with my partner. It could be with my friends, could be,
Mhm.
my staff, any of those when it shows up. And then I also look at the times that I'm in joy and in flow and
Mhm.
all is happening so beautifully. And I watch what element is creating me to be in the flow. Is it in an internal place? Is it an external environment that is calling? And, I'm so aligned with it that I'm in just the flow that it happens. And it's, going through phases by phases, businesses that I had that it failed, relationship that I had that it failed, and relationships that I have that are 45 years of relationships. And although they went through ups and downs, they're hanging in there
Mhm.
beautifully, intimately. So looking at what are the strengths, right? What were the strengths when something was working? What was it?
Mhm.
How was I thinking, the feeling? What was I doing? What was the context of it where it flows and it works? And then in comparison, in contrast with the ones that doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so based on these two, I could really, take the elements of what it is that was working and what wasn't for it working. So, as I said, like I came at 12 and, it was funny because Penny, it was funny because I kept saying to myself, one of my belief systems for many years, it was like, I can't trust anyone. I can't trust anyone,
Ah.
especially because you were abused and this and that. You can't trust anybody. Right. And then at one point, it was interesting because I started looking at my own life and it's like, you couldn't survive if you didn't trust people. Like, how could
Mhm.
you survive in a new country with no language, no skills, no nothing at age 12? You couldn't unless you trusted people and
Mhm.
unless people trusted you. So do you see how like, the oddness of holding on to a belief where actually your system, if you realized it, your relationship with the others made you survive.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the only thing you could do was to trust, right? So
Mhm.
it's coming to terms with what am I thinking and what is it real? What is
Mhm.
if I actually looked at the data, looking at the data and the facts,
Yeah.
is it relevant to, the reality that I made into myself? And then am I just, scaring myself for no reason, no good reason? And can I be more reality based? Right. So,
Mhm.
and I think most of the theories that, people know about, like, Glasser's reality trainings or CBT or, cognitive behavioral therapy, all of these talk about these pieces. And that's why a lot of times this is relevant. It's more like, how do you pick all of these pieces and put it together
Mhm.
so that it can become really efficient for a person to be able to assess themselves really quick and assess reality as, the perception of it. So that has been, whether I went into relationships that didn't work, where I went into marriage and I had to get a divorce, where I, got a job and became the head of, the unit, or I got fired. So all of these contrasts that happen in our life, and I'm sure, there isn't a life that says, "Well, I came in here and from there on, it was all beautifully going up." I mean, we all have like, all the ups and downs, and the ability to look at the contrast between the two
Yeah.
and, owning our strengths while we own our vulnerability, and having the strong part of us handle our vulnerable parts and be able to
Mhm.
forward and learn from it.
That's beautiful. I love the body language you just did, wrapping around your hand, your vulnerable parts and your strong parts. That's awesome. I feel that connection when I see movement and that sort of thing. So it sounds like when you experience that, I can't trust people, that's really what disconnect looks like from the inside. And then you had to look at the reality and assess really what's happening and be able to make those shifts to be able to learn that process from the inside, right? And going through creating that awareness. And that's beautiful. So I want to take listeners back now to where you began in discovering your purpose when you were beginning online, all the uncertainty. I'm guessing at that point it wasn't something that was normal, that was done before. How did you work through the uncertainty and follow your calling and trust your voice?
Uncertainty is always there, right? I remember taking a course with Landmark, and part of the course was, how do you like, are you really like certain? And I remember waking up one day while I was in that course, and this was like our homework, right? So I'm just sharing with my own experience out of the homework. So I wake up and there's a music that's coming out of the radio, and I'm like, Okay, like, I don't know this music. I don't even know what's in that radio. I don't even know what the waves are. I've heard of it, like minimum concepts of waves, but what are really? And then I started looking at, oh, this is a mattress. What do I know about this mattress? I only know it was Tempur-Pedic that I wanted to buy. I have no idea what's inside it. And then I look at the drapes. I just know it's a fabric, but what is the fabric made? And this thing went on, and I went under the shower. I'm like, I only know that there's water coming. I don't know where this water is coming from. And then, the shampoos, half of the stuff on the shampoo, I have no idea even how to spell, like, let alone what they are, right? Like, how did I buy this shampoo? Oh, it's just because it says like it softens your hair, right? I realized how much of a minimum of everything I actually knew and everything else, like it was like 1% certainty, 99% uncertainty that I lived in every day. Every day, this was I would get onto my car. The bare minimum of what I could do was have control over my hands and my legs and my eyes. Everything else about driving was uncertain. My car, everybody else's car, everything was uncertain. That brought a whole different perspective, Penny, which is, well, I survived this along with 99% uncertainty. Hey, I think I can handle certainty. That was part of like a big opening for me where it brought down a lot of the anxiety about uncertainty. So like a shift of paradigm almost of how to think about uncertainty. But to also answer your question of, I think that we have a vision usually that this is where I want to do and this is where I want to go. And then we start with that vision and then there's so many other angles of it shows up, right? I want to go to school. Okay. But I had no idea, what I had to do in order to pass, get A's or B's at school. I said I wanted to be a therapist. I had no idea what it takes. Every time I sat with a client, it was an uncertainty of moving. I worked with domestic violence where people come in with horror stories and I didn't know how to handle it. And they would walk out and I would run to the bathroom and throw up because I had no idea how to sit with this horror and trauma, I would sit with, clients just yelling at each other, a couple yelling at each other, and I would freeze at the beginning. So it was more about handling it by being in the space where I could be present in what is, go into my body and trust myself and trust that I can handle and that how I can hold the space and learn from that and keep learning. And I could take the same thing as a therapist or a coach where I'm in a room with someone. Or I could sit with my husband where I can, look at him and say, he's a new human being today. Who is he today? And let me sit with who he is versus like, this guy, who's part of the couch almost. Well, it's like, having there's a human being here that I want to get to know. Or as a business, right? Like, creating a virtual clinic, I had no idea what it takes for the technology in the background to handle everything I wanted to handle. So every day when client would come in and there's a glitch and it doesn't work, I don't know, like, oh, what do I do? I'm not a tech, and then I have to I have to trust other people who are in that space to bring it together. Oh, I have to be a businesswoman now. And, oh, I have to be like, create an understanding of how to be with an employee and then in HR and then this and that. Every moment there was something new popping up. And, in my head, we do an envisioning and, we're in the envisioning and looking at it all happening. But in the process of happening, there's a lot of uncertainty. Yeah. It just shows up. And it's like, okay, well, I can get afraid. I can say, I can give up. I can do all of that. And not that all of it doesn't show up for, either a millisecond or 2 days of going up and down. But it's the process of coming out of it. And, again, like being present. What can I do? What am I in control? What resources can I use? I don't expect myself to know everything. There are people out there who know it. How can I find them? How can I trust them? How can I communicate with them? How can I collaborate with them? And then, this all becomes the next level of learning where then then you face the next one, which you're like, I didn't know this one, right?
That's beautiful. Wow. There is so much packed in there. I can't even begin to explain like the uncertainty, the shifts that you had. And maybe they happened before you faced that uncertainty. Like I have the image of an iceberg in my head. And, as you began to be curious and that world opened up for you, you began to notice there's so much that I don't know. I only see this tiny little tip of the iceberg that is actually what I do know. And I've noticed that curiosity seems to become a superpower when you lean into what is underneath the iceberg, even looking at your husband. This new person today, who is this? I want to get to know him. So that's beautiful. And all the things that helped you to face that uncertainty, those things like being present, that is so powerful and really shifting into looking at, I have an image in my mind that I train people with of basically the sun on one side and the clouds on the other. So it just creates a visual map of where is your mind focusing, and learning is one of those things that help you focus on going toward the sun, right? Leaning into what are you moving toward, and who is it that knows what you don't know? I love all of that you just shared. So beautiful. So I want to take back to where people get stuck between knowing, intellectual knowing, and actually the integration of being able to do. Where is that intellectual gap when they come to, I know you go through the awareness process. Once they become aware, do you notice this gap, or what is your experience with that?
That's a great question. I will shift it in two different layers because I do believe there's two different layers into this. One is that is on a surface level that you just need to shift the paradigm. You need to shift the thinking process. And, you've always thought this was red. I'm just going to tell you that red is something that is in your eyes and it's actually blue, right? Like, you could see these pages that one perceives another. Some of the things are just more perceptual shifts, a paradigm shifts. And when the paradigm shifts happen, it's almost like, like a domino effect, it just handles. Sometimes there needs to be a different type of thinking, but because your muscle memory is used to one thing, then it takes practice after that to shift your way, right? So if you've always been a right-handed and you've always done that, and you're like, I want to do left-handed because this project is, so now it's more like, now I'm going to make a decision. And out of that decision, I'm going to keep repeating until that decision and my muscle memory do it, and then would shift that habit.
Yeah.
So that's a different level. One thing, another level that we call integration, it's because you have a belief system that you created when you were very young, and you made it generalized about you, about the world. And then, for example, if if your mother was not taking care of you at that moment because she was busy or something, and as a 2-year-old, I decided, obviously, she doesn't like me. I'm not good enough. Right. So then as I grow up, I go to school and my friend says, I don't want to share this toy with you. Then I'll say, oh, she doesn't like me. I must not be good enough. Then I go, kind of more into the school, and the teacher says something, and the teacher says, you didn't do this right. I'm not going to give you like the right grade. And it says, oh, she doesn't like me. I'm not good enough. Right. So keep going. Right. You find their mates, and then, they don't want to go study with you in the high school. And then you're like, see, I'm not good enough. You go to a job, the first job, you're not doing that well because you're just learning. You get fired, or you'll get a notice. See, I'm not good enough. So you can see one belief system that started from here because you experienced and you recreated it for yourself in different areas of your life as you're growing up. This thing has been impacted like a roots, like a carpet where, the one thread of this, a silk, is just moving everywhere in your life. And you keep fulfilling prophecy. You're going to keep saying this to yourself.
Yeah.
Now, this is much more complex than the other two that I was sharing with you. So in some of these concepts where you made it mean about yourself, not about just your behaviors or something out there, but you made it as an identity about yourself, then that integration is different. And then not only you have the awareness of how it shows up, not only you get to awareness of how you made it mean for yourself. Now we got to go. That's why it's like people will come in, and I was like the best therapist in the Los Angeles area to do trauma work. Other therapists would send them to me, and I would work with these people for 2 to 3 years. And every time they came to my office, we went through a lot of, tissues of crying. The client thought we did a great therapy. I thought we did a great therapy. At one point, Pennie, I'm like, if we keep going and this still continuing, I don't think we're doing great therapy.
Yeah.
We're doing a lot of releasing. And that's why it feels so good, because the person releases some of the space and the stress, but we're not changing the belief system.
Yeah.
And the point is, if I made this up, I got to be able to dismantle it. So I hope I answered the whole spectrum of how, when you think something, but then it's different, and how do you shift it from one thing to another?
Yeah, it sounds like number one, it's the perception of the paradigm, how you're looking now, seeing the world, how you're looking in, seeing yourself. And then number two, what is the belief system underneath the identity? What is the parts of how you decide, or the beliefs, this is true because, and then all of those experiences trigger like dominoes into this belief system. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What do you find is helping you to feel most aligned in living your purpose?
I've become very clear in my purpose is to be a service. That's what creates fulfillment for me. And that service doesn't mean I also have to be a service to me, right? So if I'm aligned, right? If I listen to my body, listen to what my needs are and offer that need for me, and then, create a space where then I need to relate. Remember, relationship is I relate within these relationships, within these types of connection, within these structures, then I want to be a service in this way. So I want to learn. I want every day. So that mission and the purpose got clear first. So when we're clear about that, then I compare everything that I do during the day. Is this matching the mission or not? And if it does, if it's holding that space, then great, I'll do it. If I create the wisdom of an assessment that it doesn't, then I drop it, right? It doesn't for me. So I think in each phase of life, if we become clear with what's the next level for me,
Yeah.
and focus on that next level. What does it take for me to create this? What skills do I need? Who do I need to learn it from? And then when I'm not of that, to notice this is not going toward this. And do I need it? Is it useful in my life? Okay. If it is, have it. If not, then it's okay. I can let it go, release myself from it and then move to being very clear with my vision and going. And I think the clarity of the alignment of my intention, my thought, my emotion, behavior, and the impact that I say, the result that I create, when this is aligned, I'm in a fulfillment state. I'm in a flow state.
Yeah.
When one of them are not aligned, there's stress going on internally. And then when I notice the stress is coming back and assessing which part of this is not aligned. And what do I need to bring it back into alignment? Because when this is aligned with your mission, that's when your fulfillment exists.
What a beautiful structure to be able to find the clarity and then find out where you're out of alignment and really tune in to following that purpose and making that impact. And it really, I feel like it comes down to living your gifts and feeling that desire to give and receive. And that's, the flow of abundance. It's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I have one final question for you, but before we jump there, tell people where they can find you.
Awarenessintegration.com, IAII.life. Any of those will go take you to the same place. We have a membership program where you could have also the app, the Foojan app, and the Mira, which is the AI chatbot, which is safe.
Okay, beautiful. So the last question then is, in your path of living your purpose, going through uncertainty, finding your next step, what have you learned about trusting yourself when you can't see the whole picture?
That everything that I've ever known, ever experienced, ever learned is here, waiting to be expressed. So looking at what's happening and trusting, assessing, looking at what I can do and I can't. And if I can't, it's not about who I am. It's just that I don't have that skill. And where can I find the skill? And if I can't find the skill somewhere, be open and curious to learning the skill as I go forward. I just have to trust that as a human being, I can survive. If I've survived so long without all of these uncertainties, something must be working here in the wisdom of holding me back. And I'm hoping on this one will also do. So sometimes it's almost like, just shut and focus. And as you focus, become aware of what the cues are outside and, trust that my instincts of survival and everything that I've ever known will show up to learn and take the next step, so that's what shows up for me.
That's beautiful. And we don't have to have it all figured out all at the same time. And I love that you just take the one next step into uncertainty and figure it out. And all of the answers that we need are inside of us. Thank you, Foojan, so much for joining us today. We appreciate you sharing your story and your journey. Listeners, we hope that you lean into uncertainty. Lean into the curiosity of what you don't know. Find those places where you can expand into living your purpose, because the world needs you. The world needs your gift. This is Pennie Wilson signing off. We'll see you next time.